Okay, so we'll begin. We'll begin, and I'm going to retool a little bit. I had planned, as announced in the program, to speak this morning about the four limbs of yoga, first four foundational limbs, and I only covered two. And I was planning to cover the other four this afternoon. And so I'm going to give up all plans of covering anything. And tomorrow, I didn't have much to say for tomorrow anyway. I've got more to say for Sunday. So I'm going to let today pour into tomorrow, and as it pours and as it happens. So I'm going to continue where I left off, and just take the time that it takes to cover the subject. And also doing that without feeling that I have a certain amount of material that I have to cover now in this session, then I'll be able to leave plenty of time for questions and answers, because that's extremely important. And I don't want people to feel that there's just they're not getting their questions answered because enough time is not being given. So that's what we're going to do. So this morning, we spoke about the yamas and niyamas. Out of the ashtangas, the 8 limbs of yoga, we spoke about the yamas and niyamas. The yamas are moral disciplines, which are the mahavratam, the great vow, and the sarva bhauma, the universal great vow. That is, they're true in all circumstances. One of the things that is wonderful about yoga, which is true of Vedanta also, and especially true of Swami Vivekananda's presentation of Vedanta and of yoga, is that it's based on universal principles. That is, it's not presenting a story that you have to believe that this story happened, as I said on the first in the morning of the first day, yesterday. It's not presenting a story that you can believe or disbelieve, or you can be entertained by, or you can find boring or something. No, it's not dependent on a story, not dependent on somebody's birth and death, not depending on the interpretation of somebody's birth and death, not depending on a ethnic, cultural viewpoint or anything like that. Just as with science, in exactly the same way as science, the principle of gravity, the modern principle of gravity, was discovered by Newton. But the principle of gravity, there's nothing English about it. England has no copyright, has no trademark, and has no patent on the functioning of gravity. Otherwise, we would all be floating away unless we paid England for the rights to use gravity. So gravity is a principle. It works in England. It works in America, it works in South Africa, it works in Mongolia, it works on the moon, it works on Saturn, it works in distant galaxies, because it's a principle. So with other scientific principles, if they are true, if a scientific principle is true, then it is in the nature of things, that this is the way things work. And so with the Advaita Vedanta, the non-dualistic Vedanta, and in the system of yoga, they're based on principles that are in the nature, in the case of yoga, it's in the nature of human psychology. So these practices of the yamas and niyamas, yes, you can find exceptions to the niyamas, and it's interesting that he does not say that the niyamas are universal great vows. He says the yamas are universal great vows. Because they were, as I said, there was a period in Christianity where it was considered that spiritual people should neglect the body so much that they don't even bathe. And there were certain saints in the Christian tradition who were so filthy that nobody could stand to be close to them. And yet they became saints. So that's possible. Desirable? No. But possible. But the yamas, he says, are sarva bhauma. They're universal, mahavratam, a great vow. And that's because they are based on principles. And even the niyamas are based on principles, but principles where, in the case of external cleanliness, you can find exceptions, but more in the sense of exceptions which prove the rule. But there are exceptions that have to be admitted. But still, they are principle-based. the cleanliness, and shocha, santosha, which is contentment, and then tapa, austerity or self-control, swadhyaya, self-study, and ishvara pranidhana, devotion or surrender to God. These, if you practice them, then they will lead to the results. And that part is a principle, that if you practice shocha in the proper way, cleanliness in the proper way, internal and external cleanliness, it will lead to the result that is promised in the Yoga Sutra. So in the proper way means everything in life, of course, can be abused. And so cleanliness also. We all know of washing mania, where it's not a question of being clean, it's a question of being obsessive. And of course, that is not meant. But the proper observance of cleanliness externally and internally leads to the result which is said. And so in that sense also it is a principle. It's not just it's not a story, or it's not something that is cultural or is something that people like to believe, but it is a principle. So that's very important to understand. So the yamas, the moral disciplines, and the niyamas, personal disciplines. So now we come to asana. So you have yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, the first four. Those were the four that I was to deal with in the first session. So now I'll go over asana and pranayama before moving on to the next four. So asana. In the Yoga Sutras, I'll read the two which are, the three which are dealing with asana before we come to pranayama. That is, in chapter 2, 46, 47, and 48 deal with asana, that is posture. And so 46 defines what asana is. Sthira sukham asanam. Sthira sukham asanam. Asanam, seat, posture, means that which is sukha and sthira. Sukha means which is easy. Sukha can also mean happy, but here it means easy. And sthira, that which is steady. So what is desired in the Yoga Sutras is a posture for meditation which is easy, easy meaning comfortable. It doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be easy for everybody. You may have to limber yourself up before you can get into a posture which is good for your meditation. But it should be, by the time you use it for meditation, it should be easy, that is natural, without pain, without discomfort, and sthira, that is steady, where you can sit steady. So of course you can sit in a chair, you can sit on a bench, you can have a variety of ways that you can meditate. One of the Swamis who helped me a lot in understanding yoga, he used to say that kneeling is a very good posture for meditation. An Indian Swami, but he would say that a kneeling posture. And I think by what he meant, because I wasn't interested in kneeling, so I didn't ask him, but I think what he meant was the type of kneeling where you're sitting on your heels with your legs bent under you. I don't think he meant kneeling like in a Christian church where you're up in the air, with your buttocks up in the air, but seated like that on your heels. And so there are a variety of postures you can take, including chairs and including lying down. Swami Atmarupananda Latu Maharaj, the disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he used to meditate lying down with a cloth over his head so that people thought that he was sleeping. But he was a great meditator, great meditator. Totapuri also often used to meditate lying down. And so that also is possible. It's not recommended in the early stages of meditation. And early stages of meditation means what? The first 40 or 50 years. Not necessarily the first 40 or 50 years, but it means a long time. The problem with lying down for meditation is that it's easy to fall asleep. Very easy to fall asleep. And so it's much better to sit erect in a alert posture in order to keep the mind vital and alert. It's hard enough to keep the mind alert when you meditate, because as soon as you tell the mind to think of one thing or to restrict its thinking, restricting its thinking means, okay, time to go to sleep. So it's best to have a posture where you are naturally alert. And but all Patanjali says is that it should be a posture which is easy, that is comfortable, without pain, sukham, and sthiram, that is steady, so that you're not wobbling, they're not moving, not falling over, etc. So then he goes on, and I'm going to come back to asana. I'm going to discuss asana in general more, but I want to go through the other two sutras also, and then speak about it more elaborately. Then he says in 47, Prayatna Shaitilya Ananta Samapatti Bhyam. That is, it's accompanied by the relaxation of tension and the thinking of the infinite. The thinking of the infinite. Actually, let me read Swamiji's translation, because I like that much more of this. I was reading Georg Feuerstein's, and his book is very good, but I don't like his translation of that. He gives his reasons for translating that way, and I don't agree with him. So Swamiji says, by lessening the natural tendency for restlessness and meditating on the unlimited, posture becomes firm and pleasant. Because that is my own experience. So I can say from my own very limited experience that what Swamiji says is true, and the Georg Feuerstein's doesn't appeal to me as true in the same way. So by lessening the natural tendency for restlessness, sitting steady in a posture which is sukham, that is easy, so you're not feeling pain everywhere and having to adjust all of the time, and which is sthiram, that is, that's why the yoga postures for meditation were developed, because they sort of lock your spine into place. When you sit with your legs crossed in one of the several different meditation postures of yoga, it brings your spine up erect, and it holds you in a stable posture. And by forming a triangle on the ground, as you know, a triangle is the most steady geometrical figure there is, because 3 points necessarily define a plane. If you have 4 points, you can have 3 of them touching and 1 of them sticking up in the air. But if you have 3 points, it's the most stable position. So that's why a stool with 3 legs is always stable on the floor, whereas a chair with 4 legs is not always stable, it rocks. But you can never have rocking in a 3-legged stool. And so the meditation posture where you're seated with forming a triangle with your legs and the buttocks coming like that is a very stable posture, and it brings the spine up erect if you're sitting in it correctly. And so it lessens the restlessness of mind because of your sitting. And then what about meditating on the infinite? As Swamiji translates it, and meditating on the unlimited, posture becomes firm and pleasant. Yes, that's a very true statement. If you're trying to establish a firm posture, if you think of the vast, if you think of the unlimited, then you begin to feel that at first you're aware of the body, and you feel that the body is floating in the midst of this unlimited field. And then gradually the contours of your body begin to merge with the field, and you feel complete relaxation, complete steadiness, complete stillness. In fact, the first real meditation that I practiced when I first began to I read a book on Vedanta and fell in love with it, and then, as I explained last night in the interview, and then I couldn't find more books on Vedanta. I found books on Buddhism, and one of them was Buddhist Meditations by Edward Kanze, who was a great Buddhist scholar who was at the University of Washington for many years. And he wrote a number of very good books on Buddhism. And one was on Buddhist meditations, and there I found this meditation which appealed to me, and I still use it after 50 years, more than 50 years, yeah, more than 50 years. And that is to, when seated, to think that let me stop so I don't forget to say it. It's not my main meditation, but I use it often in order to begin my meditation. You sit in a posture and think that your body is the statue of a Buddha. Your body is a statue of a Buddha. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to think that your body is as firm as stone. Stone doesn't wobble. Stone doesn't bob its head. Stone doesn't scratch its knees. Stone is just stone. You're fixed as stone. But a statue of the Buddha, a good statue of Buddha, what does it express? It expresses perfect peace, perfect stillness, but sentience. The feeling that yes, it's a stone statue, but if it's a good statue, it's like a living Buddha. It expresses sentience, but sentience of an infinitely peaceful state of mind. And so you're internalizing that. The stability of stone with the sentient peace of the Buddha. And so you sit and hold that. And then you just feel that you're surrounded by infinite space. And it's a wonderful way of entering into meditation, beginning your meditation. And that itself can be a meditation. But it is a wonderful way also to begin a meditation. So again, by lessening the natural tendency for restlessness and meditating on the unlimited, posture becomes firm and pleasant. And then the third, which is the last he deals with asana, is tato dvandvan abhighata. So through that, tato, by becoming established in a good posture, the dvandvas, the dualities, heat and cold, pleasure and pain, happiness and sadness, those are conquered. Those are they don't obstruct. They don't obstruct the mind. So when you can sit like that, when you are comfortable but alert and still, then the dualities of life don't disturb you. The mind is steady, and so that's as much as Patanjali says about asana. But then what about all of the many asanas, the 84 traditional asanas and many more asanas than that exist? 84 was a sacred number in India, and so many times you find things are enumerated as 84 of this and 84 of that, or the 84,000 species of animals and plants. Of course, there are many more than that, as we know, but that were mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam and such places. So 84,000. And there is a cosmic significance to the number 84, but I won't go into that right now. It has to do with precession of the Earth's movement. But what about all of the other asanas developed, for instance, in Hatha Yoga? What is the purpose of the asanas in Hatha Yoga? Well, one thing is, of course, it's not the only purpose, and I'll mention the others also. One thing, of course, is to establish the ability to sit with complete stillness and steadiness in meditation. So performing the asanas is a great help. Of course, another thing, which is obvious, and what is the reason why most people practice asanas today, is for health. And that also is good for the spiritual aspirant. You can think of the hermit in a forest cave or a mountain cave in the Himalayas, spending the day in meditation. Then what happens to the body? Well, through the asanas, the body is rejuvenated, the circulation, the functioning of the glands, everything, the flow of blood, everything, the nervous system, everything is stimulated in a way necessary for someone who's leading a very inactive life. And for the rest of us, it's good in whatever form of life we're performing. It's very good for the health. But what else? Another thing that asana does is it opens and clarifies the flow of prana within the body. You know prana, which is chi in Chinese thought, that which is manipulated through acupuncture and acupressure. It's a reality. It's an experiential reality. Like many things, we may not experience it now because we haven't developed the capability, but we can learn to experience the flow of prana. So it becomes experiential. And even those who don't experience can experience the effects of manipulating the flow of prana. So one of the things that asana also does is that it facilitates the proper flow of prana. Why is that important in spiritual life? It's important for healthy life, but why important for spiritual life? Because prana is the vital energy, the life force, that which mediates between the body and mind. Prana is, as you could say, it's between the body and mind as far as its level of working. It affects the mind and it affects the body. It's that which gives vitality to the body, and that which stimulates and causes the mental functioning. Why is it that my mind is filled with all sorts of random thoughts just firing off, all sorts of mental activity and emotions and memories and everything just bubbling up? As you find when you try to meditate. When you first try to meditate, you say, okay, now just to think of this. And you sit there and everything but that comes into the mind. Why? Because of the random flow of prana. It's the flow of prana is stimulating the subconscious mind and causing all of these random thoughts and memories to bubble up. Just to the random flow of consciousness. As you know, that's a whole genre of literature, is a flow of consciousness literature. Your own flow of consciousness is bad enough. Why would you want to read about somebody else or read somebody else's flow of consciousness? I don't know, but it is a form of literature, and in a limited space, it can be effective also. But too much of it is too much. Our own is too much, and so by the manipulation of prana and by opening the channels of prana. By channels of prana, I don't mean like, who is that? I forget who it was, a politician, a senator or a congressman, who was trying to explain to somebody about the internet, and he was showing how little he knew of it. He was talking about, well, it's the flow of information through the tubes of the internet. Or something. So by channels of the prana, I don't mean that you've got you've got tubes in your body through which prana flows. But there are pathways through which the prana flows, this vital energy, which, as Swami Vivekananda says, is like electrical energy. Is like electrical energy. And it's felt when it's experienced as electrical energy, electric-like energy, perhaps a refined form of electricity. And so by opening and clarifying the pathways of prana in the body through asanas, then you are purifying and harmonizing the flow of prana. This is intensified in the next step, which we'll come to in a few minutes, and that is pranayama. There you're directly trying to manipulate the prana. Well, actually not more directly than through asana. It's just that in a more powerful way. And so one leads into the other. One aids the development of the other. Both of them, pranayama and asana, they are meant for harmonizing the prana. And then pranayama goes a step further, as we'll see in a minute, redirecting the prana. But at first, both of them purify and harmonize the prana, because when the prana is flowing harmonically in the body, then the mind becomes harmonious, and the mind becomes calm, and the mind is led to a meditative state. And so through the practice of asanas, and again, it's not that everyone has to practice asanas, but it is a very good means for not just attaining health and other physical benefits, but for preparing the mind for meditation. And so that's why many asanas were developed. And those like Carolyn here and others who have studied very deeply the science of the asanas, then they can help with many physical ailments and all sorts of debilities in the curing or the ameliorating of physical disturbances and mental disturbances. So, and that's why many people first come to yoga. They want physical help. But after practicing yoga asanas for some time and maybe a little pranayama, and then maybe the teacher chants Om or something, and then they become interested in wanting to go deeper. But asanas themselves have the power to lead us deeper. And let me say something else that applies both to asanas and pranayama, that in our tradition, the Ramakrishna tradition, there is a mistaken notion among many that the Ramakrishna tradition is against asanas and pranayama. Well, there are many of our monks and institutions which have not yet heard that, so you should go and tell them. Because in many of our schools in India, they have yoga competitions. This yoga is taught to the students, and they have yoga competitions and yoga demonstrations. Many of our swamis, like Swami Ranganathanandaji, the great monk of the order, who was world famous, and he was president of the order until he passed away. He practiced yoga asanas. In fact, in his youth, he had been very unhealthy, very sickly. And so then he took up yoga asanas and then became the embodiment of health after that. Swami Gautamanandaji, who's a vice president of the order in Chennai. He's still at the age of 90, he must be 91, something like 90, 91, something like that. He practices Surya Namaskar even at this age every day. And so Swami Vivekananda taught pranayama to public audiences here in the West. And I'll get to the dangers of pranayama because those are real, but they've been overblown. And I want to address that also. But Swami Vivekananda gave great emphasis to pranayama, taught it freely, with proper warning that it had to be done properly, but if done properly, it's of great benefit. Again, nobody needs to practice pranayama. Nobody needs to practice asana. So I'm not preaching, go out and this is what you have to do. No, but they are very good practices. And if you find them something that you want to do, then they are helpful. They're wonderful practices. And they do help. Many of us have, well, let me start over that because I was not putting it in the proper frame. We start with physical awareness. We're all too aware of the body, and it's hard to think in terms of transcending physical awareness. That's a high possible, but a high. It seems out of our reach because we're so much with the body and so much conscious of the body. And so why not use physical awareness to spiritual purposes? And that's another thing that asana helps to do. It uses the physical awareness in order to refine it so that it's eventually easier to transcend physical awareness. And that was the purpose of asana to Patanjali. The use of asana in order to become unaware of the body. But that only happens if the body is aching and itching and just generally restless and everything, you find it impossible to forget the body. But if you can maintain a steady asana, then you find that it becomes easy, relatively easy, to forget the body for a while. Or at least to feel that the body is completely harmonious and doesn't interfere with the flow of mental energy towards your object of meditation. So that is asana. And then we come to pranayama. And so he says about pranayama, Bahyabhyantara, is that the first one? No, first one is 49. There he says, Tasmin sati shwasa prashwasa yor gati vichedaha pranayama. Defining pranayama. Tasmin sati, that is, asana having accomplished its aim of giving you the ability to sit without restlessness and in a harmonious position easily so that you can concentrate. Then, so tasmin sati, that having happened, then comes pranayama, which is shwasa prashwasa yor, the inhalation and exhalation, gati, the movement of the inhalation and exhalation, vicheda, the cutting of the movement of inhalation and exhalation. So true pranayama is stopping, not forever, for some time, the inhalation and exhalation. There are other breathing exercises which it's better to start with, where you're not actually holding the breath, but you're controlling the breath, making it rhythmical. In fact, there's Nadi Shodhana, which is simply breathing through the left nostril and immediately exhaling through the right, breathing back through the right, immediately exhaling through the left, and continuing from side to side. Shankaracharya himself, the great Advaita philosopher, he himself advises that Nadi Shodhana and says that through that, by practicing that for 28 days, the nadis, that is the channels of the prana, channels or the pathways of the prana, they become purified. And so there's a whole deep science which has been developed about the nostrils, the difference between the left and the right nostrils, their connection to the Ida and Pingala, and so forth. And there's I don't know his name, I've never met him, and I don't know if he's still here. I read about him a number of years ago after I left San Diego and moved to New York. So it wasn't easy to meet him, or I would have tried if I were still here. Actually, there were two scientists at SDSU who did experiments with pranayama. And they found through their experiments that every time we breathe in and breathe out, the brain, with inhalation, the brain expands, and with exhalation, the brain contracts. So, of course, not that much, but in a minor way. And so through breathing exercises, we're harmonizing also that, making rhythmical that motion. And through certain breathing exercises like Kapalabhati, where you breathe in and out very fast, or Bhastrika, where you're using the breath like a bellows, again, in and out quickly. Through exercises like that, then you're giving the brain a whole bath in fresh blood, giving it quick expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. But rhythm is extremely important. Everything in life is rhythm. Things that seem arrhythmical are just broken rhythms, or contrasting rhythms that are superimposed on each other, making something which seems disharmonious. Everything in life is vibration, not just for Californians. But everything in life is vibratory by nature. Last night, and for those of you who were with us last night for the guided meditation, when I said to feel the sensation of the body just as a field of energy, I didn't add, but I sometimes add when I have more time. There are other things that I add into the meditation to go deeper with it. One of the things I usually add is that notice that the sensation of the body is vibratory by nature. When you close your eyes and you just feel the sensation of the body's presence, you feel it's like a tingling. The sensation of the body, you can begin to feel it's like a tingling sensation. Tingling means vibration. What is sound? Sound is vibration. What is light? Light is vibration. What are the subatomic particles? They're vibrations. What is everything? Everything is vibratory by nature. And within the psychophysical system of a human being, whatever is harmoniously rhythmic has a profound influence over us. That's why we're told to repeat the mantra rhythmically. Om, 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 Om. Because anything that becomes rhythmical has a profound effect on the body and mind. And so through pranayama, making the breathing rhythmical, then suddenly the mind comes into harmony. Now let me back up and say something else about pranayama, which is necessary to continue the discussion. Does pranayama really mean breath control? No, it doesn't mean breath control, because prana can sometimes be used in the Sanskrit word, can sometimes be used to mean breath, but it doesn't primarily mean breath, and it does not mean breath in the Yoga Sutras. Prana means vital energy. So what does pranayama have to do with breathing? The making of harmonious, making the prana harmonious, what does that have to do with breathing, if breathing is not prana? The prana is the vital energy which governs all of our physical processes and all of our mental processes. All of them are fed and energized by prana. When you die, when we die, when I die, I shouldn't say when you die, I should say when I die. That's getting a little too personal. So, when we die, then the prana leaves the body. The prana is no longer within the body. If you've ever seen a dead body that you had seen alive, there's a striking difference between a living body and a dead body. If you see someone pass away, one moment you may see that they're about to pass away, but when they pass away, they're not there. They're not there. There's an extraordinary difference between a dead body and a living body. Even in that moment of transition between when the person is there and the next moment they're not there. So consciousness has gone, but as it says in the Upanishads, wherever the prana goes, there the consciousness has to go also. And so the prana goes with the consciousness. So the consciousness is the essential person, even for the individualized person, the jiva. Consciousness is the essence of the person. and that jiva is really the infinite consciousness but doesn't know it, and so it seems from our perspective and the ordinary person's perspective about themselves, it seems to be individualized. So that apparently individualized consciousness goes with the pranas wherever it goes to its further journey. But the prana is that which governs the body, the body and mind, and governs all physical processes. And so, how do we get hold of the prana? It's not something physical that we can grab. And so far, scientific instrumentation has not found the prana. So if you ask a medical doctor, well, I'm interested in what the Hindus call prana and the yogis call prana. You're a doctor. Where is the prana? How do you measure it? They say, well, prana doesn't mean anything to me. It's never shown up in my instrumentation. I'm convinced that it could be detected through instrumentation, but we don't have the instrumentation to detect it now. It hasn't been developed. But how do we get hold of it if we want to control it? Again, the idea is that if I could control the prana, I could control my mind. I could control the body and the mind, both. I could control my consciousness. I could direct my consciousness at will if I could control the prana. You grab something which is tied to the prana. And so all vital functions are tied to the prana. But there's one vital function that is tied to the prana in a special way, and that is the breathing. Breathing we normally do unconsciously. And that's why even when we're not thinking about it, breathing continues. So luckily, it's automatic. It just goes on as an automatic response within us. But we can breathe purposefully and control the breath. When I'm not thinking about it, it just goes on. But when I'm thinking about it, I can prolong my breath, I can make it slow, I can speed it up, and I can stop it and hold my breath. And so through the breath, I have a chance to catch hold of the prana which is controlling the breath. So prana is not breath. Prana is the vital energy which controls breath. And so by controlling the breath, I control the prana which controls it. Another place where, of course, prana is active is the heartbeat, but you find you can't regulate the heartbeat normally. There are yogis who have learned to regulate the heartbeat, but that's after years of pranayama, where they got hold of the prana and then could control the heartbeat. Your digestion, but you can't digest consciously and stop your digestion at will. No, it just goes on. So the breathing is something where we can get hold of the prana. Blinking of your eyes is another place you could do it, but blinking doesn't have much effect, and blinking rhythmically, you can do that for a long time and still not feel the pranic connection. But breathing, by bringing rhythm to the breathing, you immediately begin to feel calmness of mind. You immediately begin to feel the change. And so breathing is a very special function that allows us to begin to control the prana. So through pranayama, through breathing rhythmically, just by rhythmical breathing without holding the breath, we purify the channels of the prana, the pathways of the prana. And then when we begin to hold the breath with rhythmical breathing of the breath, and then other manipulations of the breath, we gradually get to the point where we have a deeper and deeper effect on the breath. So I said I would mention the warnings because the warnings are real, and they're mentioned in the yoga texts, that just as one has to be careful when training lions and tigers, so one has to be careful when training the prana, because a mistake can cause death or insanity. So now that has been repeated so many times that people are afraid that the first time they hold their breath, they're going to blow their brains out. So no, it's not that dangerous. It is dangerous. You can go crazy. You can create permanent illness. You can die. There was, I've never had this confirmed, but someone who had been there told me, a devotee of the order, not a monk, told me, a German devotee, that in Chennai many years ago, this was back in the 70s, there was a brahmachari who was studying pranayama and going to a teacher outside of the ashram and studying pranayama. And the teacher had seen that the student had great aptitude and he was advancing well. And the teacher said, well, I'm going to teach you a pranayama, which is very difficult, and you must never practice it except in my presence, because this one is dangerous, and you must not practice it outside of my presence. And so this brahmachari, novice of our order, he went back to the ashram, and at some point he decided that, well, I've got the hang of it, I'm going to practice it on my own. And he was found dead in his room, but sitting over in a posture where he had been practicing pranayama. So the warnings are real, but the warnings, that was because he was doing something which was especially dangerous. And just like with weightlifting, as I've used that example before, when you are lifting weights, you feel that there's a strain, but you feel that it's healthy strain, and it's doing me good, and then you put the weight down. Then you pick up a heavier weight, and you realize, no, I'm going to break something. I have to put this down. I can't continue. And so with the pranayama, the things that should be observed is, one, you should learn from somebody who knows pranayama. Don't just pick up from a book and start holding your breath. And so one thing is, learn from a teacher who knows pranayama, who has experience with pranayama. The second thing is, do it sensibly. Don't try to storm the gates of God, that I'm going to hold my breath and do so much pranayama that I'm just going to speed towards the absolute. No. Do things slowly, do things sensibly, and do it under the instruction of a teacher, somebody who teaches you how. Not that you have to always do it in the presence of the teacher, unless they tell you that. That's for special exercises which are more dangerous. Why can pranayama be dangerous? Pranayama is not dangerous in itself. It's a very good exercise. It removes obstacles rather than creating obstacles if you just observe simple precautions. But why can it be dangerous if you don't do that? It's because the breathing is one of our, obviously, most vital functions. It's one of our most vital functions, the breathing. So if I fast, I can fast for a month and be miserable and weak, but I won't yet be dead. I can go without water for several days and again be miserable and get weaker and weaker. My mind stops functioning well soon, but I can live for several days without water before I die, unless I'm in extraordinary hot circumstances or something where I get heat prostration. But ordinarily, breathing, how long can you live without breathing? Not very long, a matter of several minutes. And it's only several minutes before there's permanent brain damage done. And so breathing is the only thing that's more vital than breathing as far as our normal functions that we're aware of is the heartbeat. And so breathing is something that by manipulating the breath, you're manipulating something that's central to your vitality and central to your health. So if you do it with with ordinary precautions, and with learning what to do and how to do it, then it's the cause of beneficial effects. If you do it randomly and unthinkingly and unknowingly, then you can cause yourself real harm. So, with that warning, don't let that be a warning never to try it, because again, people have very exaggerated ideas of the dangers of pranayama. The dangers are real, but the dangers are easily avoided if you're just sensible about it and follow those observances. And as with asanas, so many asanas were developed, each with its special effect. So a number of different types of pranayama were developed also, and wonderful science of pranayama. Swami Vivekananda, again, as I said, he used to teach pranayama to audiences here in the West. He gave many, many talks. In fact, many of his unrecorded talks, unfortunately, were on Raja Yoga. But if you look at the record of his known talks and the titles of the talks, he gave many, many talks on Raja Yoga and many on pranayama, and taught people actually the science of pranayama. But if you read Raja Yoga, he says something about pranayama. If you read 6 lessons on Raja Yoga, you'll see something more about pranayama. But there was a young man who went to Bellarmine to see Swami Vivekananda back around 1897, 98, sometime in there, when Swamiji was back in India after his first trip. And he says in his reminiscences and his recording of the conversation he had with Swami Vivekananda, that the Swami spoke for a long, long time to him about the details of pranayama. And he said, from that I saw that what Swamiji taught in Raja Yoga about pranayama was just a tiny spark of the vast knowledge he had about pranayama. So Swamiji was a master of pranayama and had great knowledge of it. And so pranayama was a great science which was developed in India. And of course it's been used to some extent by others as well. Lao Tzu talks about the person who's in tune with the Tao, with the way, that their breathing becomes as soft as a baby's breath. And of course among the hesychasts of Christianity, Eastern Christianity, they practiced breathing rhythmically along with the repetition of the prayer of Jesus. And so it is found elsewhere, but in India a great science was made of it. And among the Buddhists, among the Tibetans in particular, especially the Tibetan Buddhism. You find that the yogic aspects of Buddhism really were preserved in Tibet, not elsewhere. Elsewhere, that aspect of Buddhism was largely lost, but it was preserved in Tibet. So I'm going to stop in just a minute and open up for questions, as I said I would. Let me just finish what he says about pranayama. And that is number 50, Bhahyabhyantara Stamba Vritti Deshakala Samkhyabhihi Paridrushto Dirgha Sukshma. So its modifications are either external or internal. That is, you can breathe out and hold the breath out, or you can breathe in and hold the breath in. At this time, Patanjali was very early. He was the early teacher of yoga, but even by his time it was a developed science. But it was long ago when he wrote the Yoga Sutras, and it was a time before they had developed the terminology of Puraka, Rechaka, and Kumbhaka. That is the classical terms used for inhalation, exhalation, and retention of breath. And so he talks about Bahya Stamba and Antar Stamba. That is, holding the breath in and holding the breath out at the end of exhalation or inhalation. And or motionless, regulated by place, time, and number, either long or short. And so, of course, you regulate the pranayama by the speed with which you do it, the number of counts that you do it, the subtlety with which you breathe in and breathe out, etc. All of these things are elements that control the breathing process in order to control the prana. And then he says in 51, Bhahyabhyantara Vishayakshepi Chaturthaha. This is one that most commentators say that nobody quite understands what it means. The fourth is restraining the prana by reflecting on the external or internal object. So that there are others who translate it quite differently. The sutras are, by nature, they're so short, aphoristic statements that are so short, that some of them in particular are open to a wide variety of interpretations. But this is Swamiji's interpretation. And so one way of interpreting what Swamiji is saying here is that when you concentrate on an internal or external object, when the concentration becomes deep, then the breathing stops by itself. And so that's another type of pranayama, where breathing stops of itself, when you become absorbed in concentration. Just as Swami Shivananda used to say, and other direct disciples used to say, that through the practice of japa also, by repeating the mantra, a time comes, and Swami Virajananda used to say this, through the repetition of the mantra. The rhythmical repetition of the mantra also is a type of pranayama. That is, it makes the prana flow rhythmically because of the rhythm of the mantra and the vibration of the mantra. And through that also comes kumbhaka, that is the holding of the breath, through a natural process where you're not trying to hold the breath, just through the process itself, the breath stops in a deep state of concentration. And then finally he says, tatakshiyate prakashavaranam. From that is from pranayama, comes, kshiyate is destroyed, prakashavaranam, the covering to the light. That is, to the light of viveka khyati, the light of the discriminative knowledge, which gives the knowledge that I am consciousness. I'm not the body and mind. I am consciousness itself. I am the reality itself. And so through that itself, through pranayama, it's said that one can attain to that. Just as Bill Parmenter here had asked in the last session that I spoke on about Ishvara Pranidhana, where it says that through Ishvara Pranidhana it leads to Samadhi. Ishvara Pranidhana is one of the early practices in the niyamas, but that itself can lead to Samadhi. And so here, pranayama itself can lead to the uncovering of the light of Viveka Khyati, the light which gives illumination. So I've heard people say that, well, that's cheating. Just by controlling your breath, and then that's cheating your way to illumination. No, just try it. Try it. You'll find it's not cheating at all. It's not easy at all. For years when I was here in San Diego, I used to practice pranayama for about an hour and a half every day with long retention. And it was a wonderful practice for me, very helpful. In fact, I've often felt sorry that I stopped. I stopped because of someone's advice, and I regret that happened, because it would have benefited me even more. But there's nothing easy about it. And so it's not a quick way to avoid moral practices and everything else. No, if you're focusing on controlling the breath, if you want to use that as your main path, and again, that has the power to remove the covering of ignorance, which covers the light of discriminative knowledge. But if you want to practice it to that extent, you have to control everything in your life. Everything in your life has to be controlled, and your life has to be perfectly moral and everything. So within that, everything is included. So it's not a cheat at all. So let me stop here, and tomorrow morning I will speak about dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, which are the internal aspects of the 8 limbs of yoga. Huh? What did I say? What did I say? Oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't know what you were referring to. I left. I didn't realize I left out pratyahara. Yes, okay. Pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Those 4. Yes, thank you. Good question. Very good question. Question, just to restate it. We could hear it good, but just to restate it, is that if consciousness cannot be seen, it can't be objectified. You can't say, oh, there's consciousness. No, consciousness can never be seen. It's the unseen seer. It's the seer of everything but that which is unseen. And so what is the yogi trying to do? What, for that matter, is the Advaita Vedantin trying to do? But I'll restrict myself to yoga, and let the other Swami answer the other question when and if he wants to, on another occasion. Consciousness is an interesting thing. It's not a thing, of course. And it is the thing, it's the reality, it's the only reality. Language, you see, when we speak about consciousness, we're objectifying it through language, because that's the nature of language. That's the problem of language. And that's why it said that the truth is beyond mind and speech, because the reality is something which is outside of our conceptual framework. Our conceptual framework is always subject and object. But as it said in the Zen tradition, the Zen Buddhist tradition, which many of you have heard at least this much of Zen, that the teachings of Zen are like the finger pointing at the moon. What you're indicating is the moon, but the moon is not the finger, but the finger is used to indicate the moon. So Vedanta goes further than that. The Hindu tradition goes further than that and says that, yes, the reality is not words, but there's a beautiful verse in Shankaracharya's Pratasmarana Stotra, the hymn of morning remembrance. And the second verse of that goes, Pratar bhajami manaso vachasamagamyam vacho vibhanti nikhila yadanugrahena yanneti neti vachanair nigama vochus tandeva deva majamachyutamahuragryam. So pratar bhajami manaso vachasamagamyam. At dawn, I worship that which is beyond mind and speech. Vacho vibhanti nikhila yadanugrahena, but by whose grace all words are made manifest. And so one of the striking distinctions between Vedanta and Buddhism, which share much more than they are apart, but there are certain striking differences. And one of them is this, that in both of them agree that words can obscure reality and that words don't convey reality. But Vedanta says that words themselves are manifestations of reality, and that there is a real connection between word and reality itself. And so words have the power to illuminate. They can't reveal the reality as it is, but they have power to illuminate and to express. And saying that, recognizing that words don't capture reality, but that they can indicate the nature of reality. Consciousness is self-luminous. And so in that sense, to show the self-luminosity of consciousness, the sun is used as an example. The sun is self-luminous. The sun illumines everything here during daylight hours when it's shining on this part of the earth. It illumines everything. But you don't need a flashlight to find the sun. It illumines itself. While it's illuminating everything here, it illumines itself. So consciousness is self-illuminating it. So consciousness is realized in itself as consciousness, not as an object, not something I see out here. I don't see a big light, a cosmic light bulb out there or something like that. But I know consciousness from within through identity. But it is self-luminous. And so the yogi is seeking not just an intuitional knowledge that, yes, now I know that I am that consciousness. I still see myself in the same way, but I know, I have that conviction that I know. They're seeking the direct, full experience of consciousness as consciousness. Consciousness as consciousness, where the world itself disappears. The world itself disappears and consciousness alone remains. And the direct experience of infinite consciousness, where I know that I am consciousness, I am infinite, and it's no longer conceptual at all. Concepts are gone, words are gone, everything is gone. Only the reality is there, and I know it, and I know that that's who I am. And then, as Swami Vivekananda and many others have said, if the world reappears, then I know for a fact, experiential fact, not a conceptual fact, not a word-bound fact, but an experiential fact, that everything here is an appearance of that reality. Now, the yogis, of course, wouldn't say that, because they, again, didn't go to the end that Advaita Vedanta went to. But an Advaitin who goes to that same end of realizing consciousness, if they come back from that state where they see consciousness as consciousness and nothing else, and this world reappears, then they know this world in experiential fact to be just an appearance of that reality. Nothing but that reality. As the Swami beautifully explained in the pot example. It's not that it's the reality pervading all of this. All of this is here. You are there, these people are there and everything, and sort of like a cloud of light going through everything is the reality. No, you are nothing but that. There's nothing else but that. Even when you see all of the forms, you see it. Now you see the water as the reality of the waves. You see the gold as the reality of the ornaments, but experientially. So that's what the yogi is seeking. Next question, if there are any. Over here, Gillian.
Swami, can you talk a little more about when prana leaves the body at the time of death, more specifically how that happens?
I can say a little bit about it. I can't say a lot about it because I don't have a lot to say about it. But, but how it leaves the body. Many people's experiences recorded who have had near-death experiences, of course. And there we can see. And then there's certain people like Ramana Maharshi who had a near-death experience which led to his full illumination. His was extraordinary because he was ready. When he saw that he was having this near-death experience, he followed it all the way with an inquiring mind who saw the reality of what was happening. And so one of the things that happens at death is, and I can't remember all of the details because I haven't yet died, and so mine is from hearsay and reflection. So I don't remember all of the details. But what happens when one is dying, one feels that the prana is leaving the different organs and becoming centralized. And so you find in a person who is dying They gradually, their feet and hands become cold and seem more and more lifeless. Their senses, one by one, begin to cease functioning. But then there's a radical moment where it just happens, where they're gone. Assuming that it's not someone going into a coma or something like that, where life processes are sustained but there's no brain function. But in a normal death, then suddenly just nothing is working. The person is not there. A moment before they were, now they're not. And so what's happening is the withdrawal of the prana from the body and preparing to leave the body. And then leaving the body, there are different ways in which it leaves. For some, it goes out through the sense organs. For some, it goes out through the lower organs. And for a yogi, it's said, for a high yogi, one who has mastered to a certain extent some of the higher states, it goes out through the top of the head. Now this is all from our standpoint, from the standpoint of Vyavahara, the transactional realm. It's the way we see it. From the standpoint of consciousness, consciousness goes nowhere. But from the standpoint of the ordinary perception, which is what we're seeing now and what you're asking about now, where you have an actual person who's dying and the body was alive one moment and now it's gone, the person is gone. That's what happens. The prana leaves the body through different pathways. And that's why people who have near-death experiences, they experience themselves traveling through a tunnel. If they go far enough, they travel through a tunnel. And then they find themselves sometimes outside of the body, looking down on the body. It's because they have their vital force, and their individualized consciousness follows the prana, and it goes outside of the body and actually sees the body lying there, sometimes on the operating table, and the doctors are trying to revive them. They see that they flatlined, and the doctors are desperate trying to revive the patient. And the person is up here looking down and seeing that. That's because the prana has left the body with the consciousness. That shows another thing, that the sense powers are not the same as the physical sense organs. My eyes, my ears, my nose, my tongue are the physical receptors. But the power to perceive sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, that is within the mind. It's not even within the brain. The processing is centered in the brain, as Swami Vivekananda explained it. And luckily he was at the time when radio waves were being discovered and everything. He said it's like right now we have to send, in his time, we have to send electric currents through wires. But why shouldn't we be able to send them wirelessly? Nature sends electric currents long distances. Why can't we do that? Why can't we transmit electrical currents a long distance? So in the same way, he said, right now we are tied to the circuitry of the brain. That's the wiring. But we are not fundamentally tied to the brain. We are now because of identification, psychic identification, and pranic identification. But we shouldn't have to do that. And this shows that we're not. When a person is outside of the body is lying there, not functioning. The eyes and ears are down there, but the person is up here looking down and hearing what the doctors are saying, and later telling the doctors that I heard you discussing this. And the doctor said, how could you hear that? You were dead on the table. They said, no, I heard all of this. And I saw what was happening from up here. And the doctor said, well, you couldn't have seen that if you were down there. You couldn't have seen it from that perspective. The only perspective from which you could see the things you're reporting was from up there in the corner of the room. So their power of perceiving was up here. Their consciousness was up here. So the sense powers are not tied to the sense organs. Conscious thinking, the mind itself, not just consciousness, but the thinking itself is not tied to the brain. Right now it is. But at death, the prana withdraws together with the mind and the sense powers and the individualized consciousness. That also explains why it's possible to have clairvoyance, clairaudience, psychic powers and so forth, where you can see at a far distance things that are happening, you can hear at a far distance things that are being said. They're impossible to see or hear with the physical organs. That's because the power of perception and the mind itself is not necessarily tied to the circuitry of the nerves, brain, physical organs. So here's a, oh, there's yeah, you're already coming here, and then we'll come back there. Oh, you also, okay, you've already got, so you and then you. Go ahead.
Hariam Swami. So I extend to that question. So in this case, when we die, so our bodies die. So our subtle bodies goes to, goes to some different type of world, then it's reborn. How come that world is working? Let's say we saw this is the gross world, we really perceiving it and feeling it. But in the subtle body, somewhere else going there, then I can rebirth. So in there, how that data is they managed, and how come normally they say that when I born, I choose my parents, I choose what type of body I want, where I want to born, all those things I choose before I born. So in this case, how come that world is working?
Yes, so that's a question, first of all, about the existence of other worlds. Now, to be a Vedantin, you don't have to believe in any other world. But in Vedanta, traditionally there is the belief, and Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, and others did say, and that was experiential for them, that there are other worlds. There are other worlds, but as Swami Vivekananda said, all worlds and all possible worlds are right here. Everything is right here. That's why, as Swami Vivekananda said once, I am as much in London as I am right here, because London is inside of me. I'm used to thinking of space as being this vast thing, and the things are placed in space. No, actually, the world of perception is within me. And when I go from here to London, I see my body moving in relationship to objects, but I'm not going anywhere. I don't go anywhere. I say I'm going to walk to the backyard. I walk to the backyard. I didn't go anywhere. This body moved in relationship to another object, and so I see in conventional terms that I'm going somewhere because I identify with the body. But if I identify with consciousness, then I see that yes, this body is moving, other things are moving, but I'm the steady light which illumines everything that's happening. I think that I'm moving side to side because I'm connected to the body. And so I think that whatever the body is doing is what I'm doing. No, I'm the light which is illumining all of these things happening. And if I begin to identify with that, to the extent that I can identify with that, even as a beginner, I begin to see that I go nowhere. I'm the steady light which illumines everything. Movement is not in me. Movement is in the universe of perception, which eventually I see is me, but even in the beginning, I see that the movement is in the universe, not in me. And so when I die and go to another world, I don't go anywhere. So again, let me reiterate that you don't have to believe in Vedanta. You don't have to accept anything that you can't accept. Anything that doesn't sound reasonable, you shouldn't believe it. If something sounds contrary to experience, contrary to truth, contrary to reason, you shouldn't believe it. At some point you may find that it is reasonable and it is part of your experience, and then you can believe it. But don't just believe things because somebody tells you that this is so. That's how people get into trouble, following spurious teachers and so forth. No, don't believe in anything unless you see the value of believing in it or the truth of it. But there are those who say that there are worlds, and how it works is when I die, because I'm still, even if I'm separated from the physical body, I'm still attached to the subtle body. And so I see myself traveling through a tunnel. I see myself going to the corner of the room, looking down, and then I see myself going to another world, traveling to another world. But all of that is happening right here. I don't mean in San Diego at 1440 Yupa Street. Even right now, Houston is right here. London is right here. Calcutta is right here. The moon is right here. That's the nature of perception in space and time. So there is a faculty within us, or I don't know how to phrase it, a part of us, a part of the mind, which is, how to put it, when I can't think of any way to put it except in spatial terms, and it's not spatial, but there is a place within us that's not a place, but a place, using the word for lack of a better, a place within the mind, which is prior to the experience of this world, and prior to the experience of the dream world, and prior to the experience of deep sleep. It's sort of in a gear shift. You go in a regular with a clutch and shifting gears manually. You put it in first gear, you move it to second gear, you move it to third gear, to fourth gear, or you move it over and put it in reverse. Hopefully after you've stopped. But in between all of that, there's the place where you come back to move it to another gear. So like that, there's a very subtle part of the mind where there's the possibility of these other states. And so normally in the midst of one life, there's a possibility of going into the waking state, a possibility of going into the dream state, possibility of going into the deep sleep state. But the possibility of going, if we've gone a long way in spiritual life, then even these other realms open up to us as possibilities. But at the time of death, it's another realm which opens up to us also. But we don't go anywhere. As Swami Vivekananda says, he was before the time of movies. The technology had been invented, but the application of the technology had not been used in Swamiji's time, and so he used the image of a book. He said, I'm standing before the book of life, turning page after page, but I don't go anywhere. I'm in the same place, looking at page after page, as a lifetime after lifetime, experience after experience passes before me. I go, but using the movie analogy, it's even more graphic, which we all have experience of now. I go and sit in a movie theater, and in the movie I'm going to London, I'm going to China, I'm going to Antarctica, I'm riding on a roller coaster and everything. And the beauty of a movie is, to me, the value, what's the common English word? The strength of a movie lies in its ability to make me suspend my judgment and just to go with the movie and get absorbed in it. And so when you do that, you're in London, you're in China, you're in Antarctica, you're on the roller coaster, feeling the movement of the roller coaster and everything. Yet, where are you? You're right there in your seat. All of it is happening in front of you. All of it is happening right there. You see a 3D movie and you see things happening or things moving towards you, and things are around you and so forth. But you're right there in the movie theater. Nothing, you haven't gone anywhere. And so that's like our experience now. We're not going anywhere, no matter where the body moves. We're in the same place we always were. So Swamiji says in a letter to Mrs. Oli Bull on the death of her father, he says that all souls are like in one point, and yet out of that point, the worlds are being projected. Out of that one point, all souls are right here. He's talking about her father who had just passed away. He also is right here. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's not even right there. He's right here, in the same place, exactly the same point where you are. It's like a point where all souls are right here, and yet they're projecting out worlds of perception. So that's a difficult thing to conceive of. We can conceive of it. Oh, okay. It takes me so long to see her sign of 5 minutes that already 2 minutes have gone. Already 2 minutes have gone by since she's been holding the sign up there for me to see. So anyway, let me get to at least another question.
Last question, Marge.
Okay.
Pranam Swami, my question is, what is the significance of Anya Chakra, and why there is this instant absorption whenever I close my eyes? There is this instant absorption there. What is the significance of it?
Well, the Ajna chakra, that means all of you have heard of the chakra system, the lotuses, including the Sahasrara on the top, which often is not considered one of the, they often say there's 6 chakras going from the base of the spine up to the Ajna, and then the Sahasrara is sort of transcending all of them. But the Ajna chakra, there are a number of significances to that. It's said that at that point, one is almost at illumination, at the highest illumination. There one sees oneness with a slight distinction. One feels as if, it's described by Ramakrishna and some others, as if in an ocean someone has drawn a line on the water. Just a line in the water. It really means nothing, but still you see a distinction. There's water on this side of the line and water on that side of the line. And so there's a slight distinction at that level. But coming more to your question about absorption in that and so forth, there are 2 main places that are given for meditation. One can meditate in other places also, but the 2 main places usually given in Vedanta for meditation are here and the heart. And sometimes people are told, because it's easier for most people, because they're used to dealing with things outside, of meditating on an object outside. And then we'll talk about that tomorrow. That's the subject for tomorrow, part of the subject for tomorrow. But here, the Ajna Chakra is considered one of the two places, the heart being the other, because the heart is where, as Sri Ramakrishna says, first spiritual awakening takes place. For some people, and for many people, meditating here is easier. Why? Because we feel most of the time, not that I dwell in the heart, but I dwell behind my eyes because of the importance of the eyes. As Swami was saying yesterday, that 33% or something like that, 30% or 33%, 1/3 of the mind's computational or activity is concerned with the visual cortex. And so because the eyes are so important, and it's between the ears, and it's right next to the nose and near the tongue. So we have the sense, because our senses are so important, that I dwell right here, and sort of my body is hanging down from me up here. And so many people find it much easier to get absorbed and to meditate here. However, there can be a danger there. I've known several people who, meditating there, they began to feel severe headaches. It has to be quick because I'm out of time now.
Yeah, but there is a certain kind of sinking in the heart, so it goes from here, then it goes down, and there is a sinking.
That can be. I can't say anything specifically about that. But the dangers of meditating here are that if you stay here, it is easy to get to create tension in the head. So if that happens, you shouldn't do that. Then you should try to meditate down here. If you're sinking down into the heart anyway, that's good. And then that's good. Then you don't have to worry about that. One other thing about that, and then I'll close, is that I know a woman, and she comes to our Trabuco monastery sometimes now after many, many years. I knew her back in 1982, 83. And then she disappeared for 30 years, and then suddenly moved back in the area and started coming again. She told me when I first met her in 1982 that she was meditating here and had been meditating there for about 6 months. And then suddenly she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "You have a melanoma here," right here where she was meditating. And so I had no obvious reason why it was connected to meditation, but she just thought, I wonder if that's because that's where I've been meditating. Otherwise, why would I have a melanoma right there? She stopped meditating there, and the melanoma disappeared of its own. So again, many people find it easier to meditate here, and generally, if you find it easy to meditate there and you have no bad side effects like headaches and so forth, and mental tension and so forth, fine. But generally, it's considered that this is safer. So I'll stop there.